All right, hello again, artists. Here is the second part of the video covering composition and what you'll need to know for our unit on photography in Art Foundations. So you should remember from the last video, we covered just kind of an introduction to what does composition mean in visual art and the first four rules. So in the last video, we covered the rule of thirds, the rule of odds, showing depth, and unity and variety. And then in this video, we're going to cover using balance, cropping, leading lines, and framing. And remember, in any work of art, specifically for what we're doing, photography, you're not going to use all 8 of these rules within one photo, but you're going to try to think at least of 2 or 3. So I'll show some more examples later on, but let's get going with the rest of the rules. So we covered balance a little bit when we were doing the 9 squares project, and you were trying to think and lay out each of your different squares and how will they all come together in one final composition. So this is just a refresher on that rule of balance in any work of art, 3-dimensional, drawing, painting, what have you. So balance is the ability to arrange the elements in a composition so that no one part is overpowering. You can do that through symmetrical balance, like we see in the photo of the bean or cloud gate, where it literally is if we folded this picture in half, it's very, very similar on one side to the other. So that makes it feel like there's not one side that is really overpowering. My eye isn't getting drawn to just one spot. I kind of like look at the image and it just feels balanced. It feels formal, organized, orderly because of that symmetrical balance. Versus the image of the sculpture underneath, made by artist Alexander Calder, is asymmetrical. It's definitely, if I cut it in half, it is not the same on both sides, but there's still not one area that feels more overpowering or, the negative space isn't too much in any one area. On the right side, clearly there's a little bit more dark shapes, but the way that it's split up on the left-hand side still makes it feel like there's a balance in the positive versus the negative spaces. There's also radial balance, so think of that as kind of a circle design where there's a design coming out from a center point in some kind of circle form. So a spiral can kind of be like radial balance. Or if you think of a sun where you have that yellow point and then sun rays coming off of it, that's kind of a radial balance. So with different colors, shapes, sizes, all create different degrees of interest for the viewer. Elements that call more attention to themselves are heavier, whereas less noticeable elements are usually lighter. So think about balance when you have a focal point. You want it to not feel like that's the only thing you're looking at. You want to look at the entire composition, but you still want that to be maybe something that's stronger or draws your attention a little bit more. Next rule is cropping. I'm sure all of you have cropped a photo on your phone in some way or another. But we do that for a reason, right? If I'm trying to send, like some of you when you were sending me your photos for portraits, if you were further in the distance, but for a portrait, we want to look at the face, we're going to crop out everything else around it so that that's not distracting us. So an image can lack impact if the main subject is so small it becomes lost among the clutter of its surroundings. So if we're doing a portrait of you, but then it's a picture of you on the beach 100 meters away, I'm not really going to know what to look at, or it's no longer really a portrait of you, it's more of like a landscape of the beach. So you want to make sure once you have an idea of what your focal point is, or the emphasis, that you crop away on other unnecessary things that are in that image. This is especially important for photography. Cropping doesn't make as much sense for some other art forms, but it definitely makes sense for photography. And then there's something really specific called lead room in photography that's kind of tied to cropping. So you can see that as an example in the car photo. Lead room means that you're giving space in front of an object that is moving or in front of a human or creature that is looking in the distance. So in this example of the car, there's a little bit of extra room in front of the direction that the car is going. If it was cropped right in front of the car, it might feel like the car is like stuck in this photograph, like there's no space for it to go, especially if there is negative space behind the car. Instead, you want to always give space in front of a moving object, at least a little space, or if I'm looking off into the distance, you want to give space in front of the direction that I'm looking at. Or if I'm walking, or if there's an animal like a bird flying in the sky, you always want to give a little bit more room in front of that object than you do behind it. It's called lead room. All right, our seventh compositional rule is leading lines. And again, not every photograph is going to have leading lines, but this is just like some kind of element that you could include if you're trying to figure out how to better highlight your focal point or how to create more interest in a photograph. So when we look at an image, our eye is naturally drawn along visual lines. By thinking about how you place lines in your composition, you can affect the way your audience views the image. So if I have a certain focal point out in the distance, if I think about different lines like rivers or telephone poles or a fence or a wall that lead the eye to that focal point, that would be a great example of how to better highlight that focal point or the emphasis. In both the examples shown on this slide, we see examples of lines that just kind of travel throughout the photograph. It doesn't necessarily lead our eye to any specific spot, but that's something that you could do to better highlight your focal point. I have an example in a new video that shows leading lines and how you might do that in your own photo challenge. So just some general feelings about lines. Horizontal lines tend to be static, more calming. So in that top wintry photo, the more horizontal fence kind of adds to the calm, quiet vibe of that image. Vertical lines suggest permanence and stability. And then diagonal lines have more of a dynamic, energetic feeling, kind of like in the bottom photo of the image of the road, the aerial view of the road. And the last rule is framing. So I'm not talking about like a frame that goes around a painting or drawing or photograph, but instead trying to find natural frames out in the world when you're taking photographs to highlight your focal point. So in these two examples, you see one, there's like a hole or a window in an old wall that kind of surrounds and highlights the focal point of that sculpture behind it. I think that's a sculpture. Or the photo below that where there's kind of, they put the camera behind some plants and they found kind of a natural opening within the trees that highlight that red house, and that color contrast makes it really pop as well. So you can think of finding trees or archways or holes, maybe you create some holes to act as a frame to then highlight the rest of your photograph or whatever you want viewers to really be looking at. For this, it's really important that whatever you're framing is the focal point, what you want your viewers to be looking at, the main point. So frames isolate the main subject from the outside world. And then the result is a more focused image, which draws the viewer's eye naturally to the main point of interest. So it's just a tool to help you highlight the focal point of your picture. Again, I'll have an example of that I made. So here is what's coming up next. So now we have covered all 8 of the different compositional rules. So if you need to re-look through these, I have the PDF of this presentation with all the information in it. If you have any questions, just email me and let me know, and I can try to help you with any of those. But then today what I would like you to do is on a discussion post that I have in Canvas, I want you to choose, I have 3 different paintings to choose from. I want you to write a post that talks about 2 to 3 different compositional elements that work for a painting of your choice. You can choose one of the 3. I have more instructions in that discussion post. So I'd love you to do that today on Wednesday. And then I also have another video posted that goes through some examples of photographs that did not use some of the compositional rules well. So I think by sometimes seeing what not to do, that can help us clarify what we should be doing for composition. So I'd also like you to watch that video today. Lastly, for Friday, if you want to start looking at it today, you can. But Friday is going to be work time on your first photography exercise project. So if you want to look at the project, I have another video about that and some examples and some more information. You can start thinking about what you're going to do for that project. But that's all for now. I look forward to seeing some of your photos and reading your discussion posts.